You picked on the wrong underdog, guy. Someone just linked me to this sub, and oh boy, do I have a story for you guys. I'm still proud of this to this day. Obligatory throwaway disclaimer, and all names are changed. A few years ago, I was working in a job I really enjoyed with a team I really gelled well with. There were about 5 of us working on the same portfolio of projects in different roles, and every single team member was just cream of the crop, incredibly good at what they do. I can't overemphasize how satisfying it was to work with such an incredibly competent, likable group of people. In this job, instead of getting the Sunday night blues, I would get excited thinking about the work I would be doing the next day and planning how we would solve the complex problems together. It was like a series of logic puzzles. Yes, I realize I'm a huge nerd. I promise I also had a life outside of work. The one downside, there's always a downside, to this job was Steve. Steve was not in the supervisory line for me or any of my team members, but he was about 3 levels above us and very senior. He'd been there for years and was tied with senior leadership. Steve was also a mega creep. He said extremely inappropriate things to young women in the office, and he apparently wasn't averse to being handsy, though as far as anyone knew, that was as bad as it had gotten. The women in the office all knew to steer clear of him. My first week on the job, the Whisper Network made sure I knew, never be alone with Steve. Sexual harassment is difficult to document, and no one wanted to risk their career and put a target on their back going after a big guy like Steve, so he just got away with it for years. So for a couple of years, I followed this advice. There were a few instances of Steve saying incredibly uncomfortable things to me in passing, but for the most part, I managed to avoid him. Then I found out that my teammate Rob had gotten on Steve's radar. For context, Rob is non-neurotypical and has some minor tickish behavior. He's also shy and easily spirals into social anxiety when put in uncomfortable situations. So one evening at our team's informal weekly happy hour after work, Rob lets it slip that Steve's been giving him a hard time. The rest of us are like, whoa, wait, what? Because Steve never interacts with staff at our level, except to creep on women, and we basically make Rob tell us everything. Basically for the last few weeks, Steve has been bullying Rob, making fun of his tics, and mimicking his way of speaking back to him. He's also been asking Rob how he can possibly be competent to do his job and implying he's a pity hire. Once he called him a retard. It's clear Steve is seeking out Rob for this, because, again, there's really no reason for him to interact with our team. Rob has been having horrible anxiety over this situation, and has had bad insomnia and stomach issues since Steve started targeting him. And not that it bears repeating, but just to reiterate, Rob is a fucking beast at his job. And a genuinely good guy. At this point, I'm seeing red. We all were. We tell Rob to go to HR, that his neurological issues put him in a protected ADA class, that he could get Steve in big trouble. Rob panics and says he can't do that, begs us not to tell anyone at work, and says he wishes he hadn't said anything. We assure him we won't say anything if that's what he wants, but we're all very distressed. I leave the bar fuming just thinking, okay, that's it? Fuck you, Steve. You're going down. I can't tell anyone about what's happening to Rob, because I promised him as much, so I start my own paper trail. I start baiting Steve. And I don't mean I behave in any suggestive manner or lead him on, I just stop avoiding him, and I even initiate contact myself. I IM him through the company's IM system very professionally / politely asking if a big client will be staying on through the next project cycle, and the floodgates open. He starts sending me outrageously sexual IMs. I mostly don't respond, but I occasionally keep him going by sending extremely literal responses to his innuendo-laden questions or pretending not to understand something suggestive he's saying. Sometimes when he clarifies, I'll outright say, "This isn't appropriate," or "This is making me uncomfortable," or "Please don't say things like that," Steve, but he steamrolls right over me. During this time, I've also been seeing him more in person around the office, and he often says gross stuff to me in person as well, a lot of it not just inappropriate, but bizarre and nonsensical. Is it legal to have an ass like that in that skirt? Lilwood. Every time this happens, I immediately go back to my desk and write down what he said, the date and time, and the names of any witnesses. After about a month and change of this, I compile my creep journal with printouts of the IM conversations and take them to my HR rep. I ask to file a sexual harassment complaint against Steve. As soon as the words sexual harassment leave my mouth, my rep instantly gets the head of HR and 2 other reps, and they go through my evidence with me, and ask me a ton of questions. The head of HR assures me they'll take my complaints very seriously, and asks if I know of any women around the office who have had similar issues with Steve. I'm able to give them several names. They send me on my way, and 2 weeks later, my rep formally reaches out to me and lets me know Steve has been let go. Much jubilation is had around the office. It took a couple of months for me to piece together the whole story, but basically after my complaint, HR started following up with the names I gave them, both the witnesses to my in-person encounters with Steve, and the other women he'd harassed. They corroborated what I told HR, and then through them, word started spreading around the office that HR was conducting a sexual harassment investigation against Steve. This emboldened at least 15 different women who'd been biting their tongues about Steve for ages to come forward and tell their own Steve stories. The worst story was from a junior staff member who Steve had sexually assaulted at a company party the year prior. Sad face. During all of this, IT had been asked to go through Steve's emails and IMS, and this had not only been used to validate my printouts as legitimate, but IT had found a ton of additional incriminating stuff in Steve's correspondences. Somewhat frustrating, Steve received an extremely generous severance package as part of his termination. But on the bright side, word got around the industry quickly, and Steve was poison at that point. No company would touch him with a 10-foot pole. The last time I thought to snoop on his public social media pages, he was listing himself as an independent consultant in our industry, which I seriously doubt he's actually doing, and based on his public Facebook page, he's doing a couple of MLMs, so that should kill off whatever savings he has in short order. I don't work with Rob anymore, but I did recently attend his wedding. He's extremely happy with his new wife, who is a sweet and lovely woman, and he's doing really well in his career. TLDR, powerful corporate suit pics on my awesome co-worker. I transform into a goddess of fury and end his career by exposing him for what he is. Edit, thanks for the shiny gold, to whoever did the gilding. Move on to the comment. Is it legal to have an ass like that in that skirt? How could one not swoon at such romantic rumblings? Move over Shakespeare, there's a new wordsmith in town. Yeah, I was basically fanning myself over that one. What a Casanova. Good on you, but it's such a shame that it took so long for somebody to speak up. Especially since almost everybody knew about it for years and just accepted it as some sort of unavoidable thing. Yes, you're totally right. Women have historically been penalized professionally or accused of lying in my industry when they raise these kinds of concerns, so I think everyone was too scared to say something until someone else had made the first move. I just took the time to document and get incriminating comments in writing, and I was lucky that HR handled it sensibly. I was so young and inexperienced at this time, in my mid-20s, all full of fire and idealism and unearned confidence, that I had no idea how horribly this plan could have backfired for me if the company had decided I was more expendable than Steve, and had hushed it up instead of investigating. But I do think about the girl he assaulted and how that wouldn't have even happened if he'd been exposed earlier, which is kind of heartbreaking. Honestly, at that point, you may be screwed. For example, if HR decides to get rid of you for complaining. If you've documented everything, you may be able to bring a lawsuit, but some people opt not to do so because that can get you blackballed by other companies, depending on how small your field is. A relative of mine worked in a mostly male field for years where she experienced cartoonishly bad treatment. This was standard in the industry, and when a woman at a different company sued for sex discrimination, it blew up her whole career. Even though this poor woman had been put through hell, she was hugely vilified in a semi-public smear campaign, and the men my relative worked with called the woman who brought the lawsuit the mega cunt. She hasn't worked in the field since. My relative also ended up leaving the industry, and she still has her mountain of documentation from her years at that job, but she'll probably never do anything with it. In certain contexts, speaking up means essentially choosing to be a martyr, and who has the energy to paint that kind of target on their back? The most important thing to remember, HR is there to protect the company from liability. That's why Steve still got his severance pay. They are not there to protect their employees, regardless of the drivel they tell you. If they don't take your complaint seriously, and the abuser is a higher level employee, then unfortunately you should probably start looking for another job. That doesn't need to be the end of it, though, because as others have mentioned, you can take your complaint to your local jurisdiction's labor department, all the way up to the US Federal Department of Labor. Just like the op in this post, you need to document everything in writing, writing down what was said, when, where, witnesses, etc. You also need to document that you told the person, as often as possible, that their attention is unwanted and makes you uncomfortable. Taking your complaint to the government will probably lose you your job for some BS unrelated reason, or at least the work environment will be uncomfortable for different reasons, so getting copies of positive performance reviews and things like that so you can file unemployment as well, if it comes to that. First thing first, if this starts happening to you, document everything immediately. What happened to me was caught on camera during business hours. I had witnesses, I had other girls with similar experiences, we had customers complain about his behavior, we had other managers want him out, and that still wasn't enough to get the guy fired. Everything said, every witness, every touch, time, date, write it all down. Everything. Also, do not be afraid to go for blood, be angry, push people to listen to you. I was polite, I was afraid to lose my job, I was afraid he'd kill me, I was too scared to say everything that happened to me, I was too scared to be honest that I was terrified for my life. I was told to leave out all emotions in my report. That's fucking bullshit. He threatened me to watch who I mess with because who knows who will come into work with a gun and kill everyone, so I documented that and still had to go to work every day and work alongside him, or use my PTO to avoid him, or drive 1 hour away to work somewhere else. I should have let them know I was terrified of him. I should have called police, that's another thing. Do not trust HR to fix the issue. File a police report if you are touched/assaulted or threatened. Do not trust the company to help you. They may help, but you should always be ready for them to drop you. I ended up being forced out of my job. I was told I could get over it and work with him or I could leave. I fucking left. He got fired 3 months later because another girl in the building went higher up than me after he pulled the same shit. She went way higher up. Do that if you have to. I should have. He was fired after 2 days, my investigation lasted weeks and nothing changed. So, my advice, document everything, stick up for yourself, be honest but firm, don't trust HR, and go YAI above them if possible / if you aren't satisfied. Also, don't be afraid to contact police. I pass a sign every day at my new job that's red and bold, sexual harassment is illegal. I curse myself all the time that I didn't go to the police. It's a scary experience. I hope you'll never have to go through it. I hope you'll never have to go through it. I hope you'll never